True.
Yeah. So
Anytime.
I think Safura, you can just kick off the conversation and then yeah.
Okay, sure. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining what I think is a very important and timely discussion of gender-based violence, and more broadly, I think many of us watched the president's address yesterday, and I think hearing from some really powerful women on this topic is coming at an ideal time. I am stepping in for Sia Dimotlale. I won't pretend to fill her shoes, but I'll be moderating the session. We are basically going to allow the panelists to make opening remarks of sort of 3 to 4 minutes a piece, and then we'll open up a discussion. If anybody who's not a panelist, if you have any questions or thoughts, please put them in the Zoom chat, and I will make sure that they're addressed in our discussion. So I'd like to just begin by introducing our panelists. I'm not able to see immediately if all of them are here, but I know some of them are here. So our first panelist is Zimasa Mabuse, and she's the head of legal and compliance at Yalu. Then we have Kanye Zunga, who is the executive group head of legal at a coal mining company. We are also joined by Manchadi Kekana, who's a senior associate at ENS Africa. And finally, we can thank Tibelo Mochwane, who's the founder of the Sister-in-Law platform, for organizing this. She's asked me to just read a Facebook post as kind of a primer for this discussion. And so I'd like to read that and then just go through sort of what we conceive as the 3 purposes of this conversation. And that will be more or less the formal part of it over. I'll invite each of the panelists to speak one by one. And then really this is supposed to be a conversation. So the Facebook post was posted in November 2018, which I think just shows how long this has been an issue in our country. It was posted by Zwanaka Nchefulani. And she said, "There is not a single man on earth who believes not all men. Akeko. Because if you really believed it, you would let your homies date your sisters. You don't because you know. You would let your daughters go to sleepovers in other men's houses, even if those men's wives were not around. You don't because you know. You would have at least 3 men on call that you could have babysit your daughters the way women have at least 3 women on call that they can leave their children of either sex with. You don't because you know. You would not give your daughters such tight curfews while giving your boys relatively unlimited freedom. You do because you know. You wouldn't care what your female relatives wear outside. You do because you know. You would leave your wife alone with your pastor without fear or allow her to go to him even if you knew Mamuruti wasn't around. Sorry for my pronunciation. You don't because you know. You would let your wife host your homies when you're out of town. You don't because you know. Your wives wouldn't feel anxious about giving you daughters, and you would feel equal joy at the arrival of a daughter as you do at the arrival of a son. You don't, you feel terror because you know. And I think that's incredibly powerful and really sets us up to have a discussion that I think is trying to achieve 3 things. The first is, I think this is a time for us as women to collectively mourn, share our sadness, our frustration and anger, but also channel it into something productive. So as much as we want to share our feelings here, and we should also try and think of innovative ways and strategies to advocate for ourselves during this pandemic, to unpack the ways in which we as women in law can get involved and make an impact on gender-based violence. It shouldn't be the case that we are no further than we were in 2018. So I'd like to invite Zimasa to begin our conversation and just share a couple of reflections.
Hi, evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I just sat here so triggered here on my bed. Let me just start by saying something that happened just this morning. I have someone on Facebook who actually posted that she's no longer running outside because she's run out of roots and she's scared of reusing routes, right? And I actually had to comment that never mind having to reuse routes. I've had to stop running with my cell phone. I've had to stop running with music so that my senses are heightened when I'm running and I can hear everything happening. I've had to stop running with my phone because of all the snatches that have been happening. Plus, also, it's an attention seeker, right? Having your phone with you, it draws attention to you. I've had to learn the map of Bryanston, where I live, so that I can change routes every day and never use the same route twice a day. And I can't even remember what was the last comment that I made about all the various changes that I've had to do just to do something which I love so much, which is running, And she actually then commented that she's getting an Apple Watch so that she's able to still press emergency should anything happen to her while she's running. And I don't have an Apple Watch. I just have a Fitbit. I can't call anybody if I'm out running and anything happens to me. And I was about to comment, I should get an Apple Watch too. And then I realized, why should I be economically inconvenienced because of the current situation in my country, being that men are incapable of doing something as simple as respecting and leaving a woman alone, never mind all the other heinous acts that have been happening right now. And I just thought to myself, why do we have to put ourselves in this position where, again, I repeat, we are economically inconvenienced? What else is it that can we possibly do? What other avenues can we possibly think of to try increase safety within our country? And I think I sat most of the day kind of being blank. I don't know if I'm blank because I am defeated. I don't know if I'm blank because I just don't know, genuinely don't know, especially as a legal professional in 2020 today. What more can I do? What more can I do to ensure the safety of women? I talk about it enough. Should I talk about it more? Should I be sharing more information and knowledge and numbers and contact details and email addresses and info packs and what have you on my social media? Is that what I should do as a legal professional? Should I be lobbying? Should I be should I be finding avenues in regulatory bodies or parliament or standing committees and all other committees, to try reduce the crime and the gender-based violence taking place in my country? What is it really as a legal professional in 2020, as a young Black woman? Because a lot of it is also really targeted at Black women. We don't like to talk about it, but it is the truth. What is it that I can be doing to really eradicate as a legal professional, to really eradicate all of the violence taking place against women? And to come to a conclusion, I think I went blank. And I think the only thing I can think of, and I'm happy to leave the answers to the rest of the floors and to the rest of my esteemed panelists and guests and what have you, is to, outside of lobbying, sharing info, sharing contact details, using my platform, using my voice, using whatever influence I believe I have, what else can I do as a legal professional in 2020 to ensure that I and all the millions of women in our country are safe? And I think that's where what's been percolating in my mind the whole day, what more? What more is my question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's such a honest, and I think it sort of acknowledges this feeling of helplessness that I think we've all been feeling.
Yeah.
I just want to check if Kanye is on with us. I'm not seeing her.
Let me just check for you. I don't see her.
Yeah, I don't know, because there's a Galaxy S8 and then yeah, okay, but she's, I don't think
Galaxy S8 is Manchadi.
Oh,
so I think we
okay.
can maybe, So Safura, I
right.
would maybe direct my next question to Manchadi.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what everybody looks
problem.
like. I'm only recently joining your community, so I'm gonna hand over the floor to Manchadi to share some of her thoughts. Very nice to meet you, Manchadi.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you. Well, thanks for that, Zavasa, for just throwing me under the bus after that very, very, very eloquent encounter and just sharing. I just also want to say that, you know, I have the same sense of helplessness. I have also been mulling about it really for 2 weeks for me, because I also had a little bit of an incident that I'd actually like to share. It's not hectic, but I went to the store one morning at 8 o'clock, and I was like, you know, oh, I feel like a really good cup of coffee, and there's a center just around the corner from me. So I quickly dashed to the shops, and I needed something, and the coffee shop that's actually open wasn't open. And I just remember having a moment of getting out of my car with my mask on and feeling like, wow, for the first time in my life in South Africa, I haven't been harassed or heckled in months. It's so refreshing. And I just remember walking into the Checkers and, you know, going about my merry way, looking for my milk and for my coffee. And this gentleman actually came to me and said good morning. And I sort of looked to the side and I said morning to him as well. And he went on to comment about my physique and how he liked my walk. And she proceeded to ask my name. And I think I had literally 2 minutes before that just, you know, had this moment of sigh and relief to be like, you know, for the first time, you know, I can walk around and I'm not so nervous. And 2 minutes later, this gentleman just comes up to me and basically trying to force a conversation with a mask on, mind you. I mean, we're supposed to be social distancing, and this man is drawing closer and closer to me. And I sort of dropped my basket and I left the store. And it's just to show you that, you know, the state of women's safety in South Africa is really, really, really dire. I was in a store at 8 o'clock in the morning in my gym attire, just trying to grab some essentials, and a gentleman couldn't help himself but to disturb my morning run, which is supposed to be 5 minutes. I could get back to my work. And it just got me thinking that I had a temporary lapse of just gratitude to be like, I haven't had to deal with that in a while. And it literally happens just as I was thinking about it. And just to echo what Zimasa was saying, is it's really, really difficult for myself as an attorney to really figure out what it is that I need to be doing. Am I not sharing enough? Am I not involved enough? Am I not understanding the policies? Am I not engaging with family members and friends enough? Am I not using every single platform that I'm on with the little influence that I have to sort of engage and tackle ways in which we can, you know, basically eradicate gender-based violence? Because I think curbing it at this point is really not going to do enough. There's just too many people dying in South Africa at the hands of men. And really, I think the first step for me would be to engage more men. I've just been looking at my social media and Facebook feeds and the sorts of things that we are all sharing. And it's interesting because men still don't understand why we're calling them trash. And it's men that we're engaged with on a daily. They sort of get the violence against women. But again, they also have that, but I don't do it. And I also think we're not having conversations enough about the microaggressions of what cause women to be uncomfortable and to feel unsafe. I mean, that encounter that I had in the store was with a decent man who was saying hi, but I just felt like from my body language, he should have seen that I was uncomfortable. And at that point, he should have left me alone, and he didn't. And that happens a lot, where you are engaged in a conversation with your male friends, family members as well, parents, whatever it might be, where something is said that's inappropriate or that makes you feel uncomfortable, and your entire body language changes, and no one actually addresses the why, but rather the why are you so tense, as if it's your fault, and everyone ignores the person that is actually causing you the angst and the anxiety and the fear. So for me, I think we are now at the point, and we've always been at this point, and I think we've always wanted the buy-in of men, and it's just shocking that we as women who are the victims and the recipients of gender-based violence are having to beg our perpetrators to engage us and find solutions for a problem that they are causing. But I do recognize that there's a big lacuna, and we're missing it, in that we need to engage more men. We need men to understand that gender-based violence is not just being beaten up, being hung. You know, it's the small microaggressions, the little catcallings, the inappropriate compliments, the little stroke on the hair, the little brush, whatever it is, where you are in a female space without the consent of that female, is, in my view, violence. You are literally invading me and you're causing me angst, and it doesn't matter to you because it's not, you know, loud, it's not aggressive, it's not quote unquote threatening, but it is because, you know, you're not engaging me as a fellow human being. You're literally over sexualizing me. You're making me aware of the fact that you're looking at me in a sexual manner. And you're then going on to have a sexualized conversation with me. And so I think that's really, really, really the first start. I just think we need to just keep engaging men, correcting their language. I know it's daunting. I know it's an arduous task, but it's something that we need to start doing. And I see a lot of women are coming together on Twitter, coming together on Facebook, or coming together on Instagram to correct those minor microaggressions. And in fact, I actually did see that engagement with Zimasa and the young lady who explained how, you know, she's run out of roots. And I think, you know, I think a gentleman did comment to say, oh, wow, I never looked at it like that. So we are starting to kind of change the narrative, but there's millions more men who just don't get it. And I think I'm just going to pause there. That will be my parting shot for my introduction.
I think if I can just add, sorry, I know, Safura, you want to move on to the other panelists.
No.
But there is something that I spotted. I think a friend of mine sent it to me today. And it's just because what Manchadi said, she put it so excellently in saying that it's not just about the murder. It starts from something as small as you making a statement about my physique in a setting that is not necessarily appropriate. I don't know when it can ever be appropriate, so let me not even say necessarily, but in a setting that is not appropriate. And I mean, it's such a pity that we're not all sitting together, but there's this hierarchy. I hope you can all see it. And the hierarchy is just, it literally, everything that Manchadi just said, how it doesn't start with murder. It starts with slut shaming, saying boys will be boys, and objectification, which is what happened to Manchadi. It then moves up to catcalling, threats, harassment, and even stalking, which then graduates into stalking, groping, and sexual coercion, graduating further to like an honors level of sexual assault and just full-on assault, and then the master's level being murder. So I just love what Manchadi said. And if I can loop it back to being a legal professional, if we are to look at this hierarchy that I'm trying my best to kind of share with everybody. Oh, okay, I'll share it in the group just now.
I'll then post it on my page on the sustainable.
Excellent. Will do. Thank you so much, Bello. And if I can loop it back to the conversation being I as a legal professional, we as legal professionals, us as legal professionals, what can we do? It probably starts with, as eloquently as she put it, which is conversation. But what is conversation? It starts with policy, right? That's conversation. That's conversation at a broader level. That's written conversation. That's written. Don't do this. Don't comment on my body. Don't comment on my figure. That's us codifying all the things that you should not be doing at this very bottom level, right? So as a legal professional in corporate like myself, this actually is what I can do today as me, as Uzimasa, is maybe go relook at my company policies, go relook at the disciplinary policy, go relook at the sexual, I forgot what the full name is, but the sexual harassment policy. Go look at the harassment policy. Go look at policies, because policies cascade from what? From law, right? It's a legislation, it's policy, and what have you. So I myself can start as a legal professional today by reviewing all the various company policies, ensuring that training takes place, ensuring that there's awareness, ensuring that staff has signed that they actually underwent this training. And it starts at something like that as a legal professional. But the point that I'm trying to make, to kind of talk to what Manchadi just said now, is that it starts at the very bottom. It seems like minor issues. It seems minor to say, to wonder, actually not to say, because we're so often scared to say anything, but to wonder why you would think it was okay to comment on my body while I'm doing grocery shopping, to wonder why it'd be okay for you to just whistle at me while I'm running. It starts at the bottom there. And that is where we need to start, right there at the bottom, before we even get to that master's level of murder. I can't even believe I just put master's, which is a qualification of such high regard, next to murder. But that is where we are, you know.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. I'm so upset that I've just put in a debonair qualification like a master's degree next to the word murder. But that is really just where we are in our society in South Africa right now. But it really, just to conclude my point, and just to speak to what Manchadi just said now. It starts at the bottom for us as legal professionals. Communication, policy, awareness, training. Yeah.
No, I think those are very important points that you've made. So thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. And I think you've provided kind of a framework for us to discuss these issues. The one thing I did want to comment on with what Manchadi said is, thank you for sharing that story, because I think it shows just how disrupted our everyday lives are by what is happening to women in this country. And I think the fact that you can't just do grocery shopping is it's such an important example. So I'd like to hand over to Bello to make her opening comments. I see we're almost halfway. Yeah,
I just want to make a comment. Kanye did excuse herself, but I previously had Wela on the podcast as a guest. So I don't know if she just wants to add something in place for what Kanye would have contributed to the conversation.
Sure. So Wela, I know a little bit about Wela. I know she's an associate at ENS, I think.
Yes.
And she clerked at the Constitutional Court just before I got there. So
yeah. I don't know if
think before
add something.
Can we put you on the spot, Wela?
Okay.
Is she not on mute, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, let me check.
Okay, I think Tabela, why don't you start?
Yeah.
Why don't you start, and maybe if Wela is up to giving a comment, she can send me a message in the chat.
100%. Okay, so I've got a few things that the ladies mentioned, but the first thing is when you opened up the conversation with that status, which I think I've read so many times and also put it up on my own platforms as a status. I haven't read it out loud, and just hearing somebody else read it made it so real and so raw and actually so painful, why? I mean, I've got a boy child, but I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't trust his dad giving him to another man to babysit, if that makes sense. I can't think of that. And I also remember at some point I had to stop my brothers from helping with bath time, my own brothers, because and you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're torn, because why are you leaving a 4-year-old boy to be bathed by your 20-year-old brother? At some point I had to put that to a stop. And just reading that out loud really just made it so real to me and reminded me of my own insecurities and reminded me how much I just don't trust men around children, because I know. So just hearing that loud was mind-blowing, actually. Then with the running thing, I don't even bother running anymore. I used to be such an avid runner. I did a Soweto marathon once, and I used to really love running around the block. And I heard, Zimasa talking about learning the map of Bryanston. What a heavy burden to put on a woman. What a heavy burden to put on a woman who's just trying to run. A simple thing like running is a heavy burden. Simple thing like what must we wear to Checkers when we're doing a quick run for groceries? Do men think that, we don't see that they've got cute butts or that they look handsome? Does it not matter that we never comment on men? Do they ever see us doing that? I will never comment on a man's physical appearance or cute butt under any circumstances. If we're not already vibing on that tip, who am I to comment? Even if I meet you at a bar, if I really should shoot my shot, then most likely the best thing for me to do is invite you for a drink. It has nothing to do with me saying, I'm buying you this drink because, wow, what a cute cleavage. It's those microaggressions that Zimasa and Manchadi just highlighted. We also see cute men. Women see cute men out there. Women, see a cute butt at the gym and they want to comment, but we don't do that. So why is it a burden on women to educate men on how to approach us? It's a sense of entitlement that men have because they think that we are things, objects, we are to be objectified. We are to be, we are pieces of meat. So I don't understand what it is with men when it comes to, the way they approach us. There are respectful ways to approach a woman without making her feel insecure or insensitive. Because I can bet you right now that when Manchadi went back to her car, she had to look over her shoulder because she was like, I wonder if this man is following me. I don't think there are any men out there who wonder if a woman is following them into the parking lot. Then a few months ago, I had also seen a post that was warning women that when they're parking at the mall or getting into their cars, they must make sure that they're not parked next to any vans, because the people in the van can open that, that sliding door and grab you. Why are there so many obstacles and burdens in place that women have to keep remembering daily? Over and above our studies for our masters, over and above our demanding jobs, we have so many things to memorize just to stay alive. Why is that burden on women? Then the last thing I want to share is this article that I was reading in Destiny magazine at the beginning of the year. And I really think that if the problem can be tackled from a corporate level, corporate needs to step in. And I think that's where we need to be making the most noise, because more than anything, corporate has the resources for awareness, to create awareness around gender-based violence. But it says GBV leads to increased absenteeism from work, which then results in an opportunity cost to business. GBV may also cause women who are present at work to be less productive due to depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, physical pain, and stigmatization. Where victims lose their jobs due to absenteeism, businesses must incur recruitment costs to replace them. The estimated cost to business during 2012 and 2013 was $1,800,000, according to a KPMG report. An effective intersectoral funding model is needed to better coordinate the national response and improve budgeting and implementation efforts. If we're able to stop this epidemic, more must be invested in prevention, not just response. I mean, a woman is not going to work, and as a result of not going to work because of GBV, she's losing her job. When she loses her job, how many more specifically Black people does that affect? Because of one man perpetuating violence against this woman. One man, literally, it takes one man to have a ripple effect on the whole system. Yeah, that's my remarks.
I think these are very powerful thoughts, and I sometimes feel like using the language of money is sometimes the only way to get certain interests to hear what you're saying. I'd like to, if you guys are open to it, just pivot the conversation slightly. I think everybody has shared some incredibly personal stories, but I kind of want us to look at it in the context of the COVID crisis that we face now, because people have been saying there's two epidemics happening during COVID. There's COVID and there's the GBV that is emanating from lockdown. And I remember just at the start of the lockdown, I read a incredibly powerful article on Bekisisa about a woman who was fleeing her house with her children early in the morning, hoping to get out of the house before her husband woke up. And she was one of the tens of thousands of calls that GBV and domestic violence phone calls have been receiving during this time. So I'm also just wanting to pivot this to like a completely different group of women who have a completely different situation that they're facing, and it's being exacerbated by this public health crisis that we're facing as well. So I'm wondering, Manchadi, if I can toss it to you for some reflections on that side of the epidemic.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I also just want to say that GBV is a worldwide problem. So everywhere in the world where you have had a lockdown, you have had an increase in domestic violence cases. And I think it's so important for us as South Africa, as women, as policymakers, as government officials, to also lend our solutions, or borrow rather, our solutions from what the world has done, because lockdown was inspired by what was happening all over the world. So some of the things that I've just been reading about at the start of lockdown, because I remember it being a really, really big problem, and also one of my concerns to say, what happens if you're living with your abuser? And I thought, okay, maybe if there's no alcohol, it might lessen the load on women who are being beaten up by men. But actually, statistics show that actually has had no effect on. So over and above having that hotline, which I think, has been helpful to an extent, I believe that right now, today, or from the 1st of July, or from next week, when we're looking at regulations and what to do going forward for lockdown, you actually need to have um, domestic violence cases or reports as part of essential services. So all the frontline workers, anyone who works in a store, anyone who's working during lockdown, needs to get some kind of informal training to help women who are walking into stores who are looking like they are victims of GBV, to get assistance from those frontline workers. I know it's worked in some countries in Europe where, over and above the nurses and the police officers, people who are at clicks, who are discam, have someone in the store who's able to assist someone who walks in and looks like they're in dire straits and they need someone to help them with a domestic violence situation. So I think that is one of the solutions that we can possibly, pitch to government or, make noise about, because I think it's important. Women who are walking to petrol stations, who are walking on the street, they should be people who are there to assist them and take them to the nearest shelter or maybe to the nearest police station. And I think, just to speak about that, I don't know if you listened to the president's address. I caught it a little bit late, but I remember him saying that, there are police stations that are available for domestic violence victims to sleep if they can't go home. And it just shows you how far removed government is from the realities of women in this country. SAP is part of the problem. No woman in their right mind would feel safe sleeping in a police station with other police officers who are men after being abused by their male counterpart, because studies show that more often than not, some police officers are actually part of the issue. They'll either catcall the woman or, add to her sexual harassment or just, her distress. So I think one of the solutions, or rather one of the things that I table would be, to train a number of, essential service workers, frontline workers, people who are, in the day-to-day and are interacting with people, to be trained in, trying to, hand out a GBV hotline pamphlet, or giving the lady a phone, to say, do you have family around? Is there any way we can move you to a friend who can help you? And I think that could be a start for cases like that, where a woman is running away in first thing in the morning with her children, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't know where she's going. Obviously all of this needs finance, so I know that governments had earmarked some funding for shelters for GBV. I'm not sure how those funds are being directed. I'm actually not even sure if those shelters are working, and how far are they? I think that's also another thing. Are we actually in areas where women are affected and impacted by GBV? Do they have access to these shelters that are there to protect them? How quick is the response? I think these are some of the conversations we need to be having. But I would say interim, train essential workers, essential service workers, to try and assist us with the plight of women today.
I think that's a very cool, neat solution. I'd like to offer the floor to Zimasa to add her thoughts or reflections.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm always going to agree with Manchadi because she raises such valid points. Apart from training frontline workers and essential workers, what about their protection as well? I have almost all my life, and I promise you that sounds like I'm exaggerating, but almost all my life I've always wondered, why do I see restaurant workers queuing for a taxi?
Yeah.
You as the restaurant owner are the one who asked them, right, to work until such a time. You're the one who, because you need to make revenue and profits, you're dependent on them leaving late. So why aren't you providing the transportation accordingly for them to go home to afterwards, And I promise you, I've wondered this all my life. It still pains me till this day. Like, I promise you, to this day, I will even have fights with my husband when we're at a restaurant, and I hate being one of the last people to leave, because by ethically, not even ethically, but by principle, restaurateurs aren't allowed to kick out customers that are still there, even if the restaurant has closed. You actually have to wait for them to be the one to willingly walk off, unless it gets to a point where it's just become, if the time has just been overextended, And I agree. Let's train frontline workers and the like, but let's also protect them too, because everybody is vulnerable to these attacks. Everybody is vulnerable to I don't even know what other word but everybody's vulnerable to just at the end of the day. So honestly, guys, we just need to get to a point. And again, I'm trying to figure this out as a legal professional myself. And I'll just give you an example of what I did at the company that I work at. I mean, there was a time when there was one day, it was one day where one staff member who I happen to be close with, and we are our levels are completely different. So I'm an exec, I'm the head of legal, and she's a call center agent, okay? But we get along very well because I get along with anybody. And she actually got home at 8 p.m. in the middle of winter. This is just 2 weeks ago. And I asked her, Asanele, why on earth did you get home at 2 p.m.? And the reason was because right now, because of COVID, they cannot fill the taxis. They can only say a taxi can take 16. They're only allowed to fill it to 8. They can't fill it to capacity. The moment I heard that, myself and my other executive, a friend who's the head of operations, so she's female as well, brought up, especially her, brought up that since this is a situation whereby because you cannot fill taxis to capacity, it means that in their now, let's say if we're strict, cut off work ends at 4 p.m. for all people that use public transport, and maybe just cut their lunch then. Let's just say that you now only have half an hour lunch, thing that we implemented immediately. And that is just one way in which employers and us as legal professionals in companies, in corporates, in state-owned companies, because they're companies too, in state-owned entities, in organizations, can start to actually play a role in reducing incidences of gender-based violence. It's just by using human empathy and saying, this is the situation, and especially now in COVID, this is the situation, because you cannot fill taxis to capacity, and because the vast majority of South Africans use public transportation, then let us close office earlier. Or if it cannot be, because I'm a restaurateur, if it cannot be that I cannot allow my workers to leave at 4 p.m. for whatever reason, and I need my restaurant open at 11 p.m., then I need to bring it upon myself to actually provide the transportation to get them home. We really, I know we feel defeated. I know, and I know we feel helpless, but there are certain things we can put in place and policies, and there are certain principles we can put in place to minimize the incidences of gender-based violence, and everybody needs protection. Absolutely, every single woman needs protection, no matter what her position is, whether she uses public transport. In fact, even more so because she uses public transportation. But that's also not to say that one who uses her own transport in the form of a car is not any less likely to be in this unfortunate circumstance, because it is possible that I walk to a parking lot that's empty at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., or whatever the case may be, and something, God forbid, happens to me, touch wood, dear God, touch wood. But honestly speaking, we really need to get more involved at a policy level. We really need to get more involved at an empathy level. We really need to get more involved at a principle level. Just like what we did at my company, we said, everyone who uses public transport right now, 4 p.m., cut off, go home. Your lunch is cut, and we rely on your integrity to not take your lunch more than that half an hour that we've now allocated to you, but you're going to be safer. You're going to go home earlier. The sun will still be up when you go home, and all those other things. So look, I think we just need to be louder in our positions at work. We do have a role to play, and I know we always think that it's something so small, but now, because my colleague who was the head of operations spoke up about her staff members getting home at 8 p.m., it saved about 10 women in my company. It's just made their lives a little bit safer, and that's 10 lives that are possibly saved, and that just those 10 lives become a ripple effect, you know, in this country. It becomes 10 more lives because it's 10 more people who are alive, and it's all like a domino effect. So there's in the smallest way possible, and I urge us all as legal professionals, and as women who are legal professionals, to find ways to please kind of really put practices in place that will ensure that our counterparts, our peers, our fellow women are safer. Yeah. Sorry, I can go on and on about this.
And I think that's the passion we want from people,
Yeah,
right? Like we're all here to hear about
Yeah.
I would like to just tease out two things from what you said. The one is you know, somebody once told me this saying, which is, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one piece at a time. And I think that's what both you and Manchari are getting at, is let's start with small achievable things and let's take it from there. But there's something else that I think Gbv, I'd like to invite you to comment on, which is, your story highlights something really important about intersectionality, because the reality is, when we look at this, inequality is another layer, and it exacerbates the problem. And so, you know, it's one thing for us to look at it and say this is something that affects women, but the reality is this is something that affects Black women more. It's something that affects poor Black women even more. And so I think, you know, Gbv, I'd like you to comment a little bit on kind of, you know, about this intersectionality and this inequality in gender-based.
Yeah, I think for me, the closest that I've
South
come.
Africa, and kind of how we can look at that.
Thank you. I think for me, the closest that I've come to, you know, hearing about the rise of domestic violence during the beginning of the lockdown was when a friend called me to say, what should she do? Because I think we were 3 days into the lockdown, the initial 21 days. We were 3 days into that, and her helper called her and said, I can't be home with this man. Can my children and I come live with you? She said that to her, and she was like, I can't be with this man. And my friend was, you know, really, really torn apart, because she was like, there are no cars on the road. I don't have a permit. She doesn't have a permit. So we could get into trouble with the law by just trying to fetch her, or, you know, trying to get her to come to me. And for me, that was so heartbreaking. And the reason why, you know, her helper couldn't stay at home with this man was because the husband, or I think it was the boyfriend, was more frustrated without alcohol. But here's the plot twist. He was just as abusive with the alcohol. So I don't know if men think that, you know, this lockdown period hasn't been frustrating for us all, but you literally don't see, you don't see women beating up their children out of frustration. You don't see women beating up their husbands or their partners out of frustration. So it really just goes right down to, you know, the poorer you are, the less available places you have to run. You know, if you're in Joburg and you're already living in the townships, your closest family member might be in the Eastern Cape, in KZN. You don't want to burden your friends by going to visit them with 2 or 3 other kids. So the people who are hit the most by domestic violence are people who don't have resources, who don't have medical aid, who don't have the luxury of wearing foundation to work to cover up the bruises, who don't have the luxury of, you know what, in order for my kids to be safe, I will take them to my mom's house because the mom is in the Eastern Cape. And that's how you get cases of frustrated men killing their female partners and the children. We've all heard of devastating cases where men have killed 3 children plus the wife, you know? I think last year there was even a situation where a man actually even went out to the school to go kill the other child who wasn't in the initial group of people he murdered initially, and that was horrific. But it really is that, you know, the people who are affected most by domestic violence are the people who don't have the resources to protect themselves, because even the system is not protecting them, you know. And then I also just wanted to cover I'm not sure which platform I had seen this on, but just in line with what Zimas was saying about colleagues knocking off late, there was a man who said that he noticed that this woman was working at McDonald's until late, And, you know, he was just in a fortunate position that every single time he got to the taxi rank, he was there, and that they lived in the same area. So he found ways to walk her home without her knowing that he's walking home. So he'd often see her, then get into her yard, then he'd carry on walking for a bit and then turn around so as not to alarm her. So this woman spent, you know, a few months thinking that this man lives further than her. Meanwhile, he lived before her stop, but would just go off so that she feels safe, you know? And then he would come back to his own house. But he was just like, this woman was always knocking off late. And I didn't know how to make her feel safe without her feeling that I'm a perpetrator. So I'd always make sure that when we got off, I'd let her walk at least, you know, a few hundred meters, and then I'd walk behind her and, you know, mind my own business while making sure that she's within my sight so that nothing happens to her. And it just takes one man, guys. It takes one man to do this. It takes one man, but where are they?
Yeah. Manchadi, I think, wanted to jump in, so go ahead.
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much. I just want to add on to this intersectionality point, and I think we're all aware that, you know, the hardest hit are the poorest of the poorest, and I think, you know, it's so important to see what industries they work in, right? So if they're not domestic workers, they're working for our big retailers. They're working, you know, they're working for franchises, and it's such an important thing to actually have those essential service workers trained in something like this. And for them to be trained, you need the buy-in of the employer. And so it's incumbent on a McDonald's, it is incumbent on a Woolworths, it is incumbent on a Pick n Pay and a Checkers to be aware of these women's situations. It is not that simple for them. They are living in dangerous times. And so if you're asking me what the solution is for now, it is to literally inform those employees to say, look, those employees, that your employees are at danger. They literally risk their entire life for the salary that you're giving them. And we need for you to come to the party. We need for you to put measures in place. Like Zamasa says, from an operations perspective, if you're having employees that are knocking off at 6 and they're only getting home at 2, what are you doing? Do you have a lift club that's dropping them off at the taxi rank to make sure that they actually arrive at the taxi quicker than they would have if they were walking, to make sure that they are in a taxi at a certain time, to make sure that they are home when it's at least a little bit light, or there's kinds of movement where they know there are people moving around and they can get home safe. You need the buy-in of those employers. And the second thing is, in the training, you're also creating awareness. I think people don't talk enough about their situations. I mean, if you have a domestic employee that you're employing and you don't even know that they're being abused, what kind of employer are you? Are you not engaging? Do you not know what their situation is? Do you know how many kids they have? Do you know the situations of those children when you have, when you have someone who's in your home who is, quote unquote, part of your family and helping you, raise your kids, make your life better, you actually need to know their situation. And I think, it's a little bit difficult when you are living in a smaller place, but for me, if I was in Debella's friend's situation, I probably would have risked it and brought her home. But that's a situation of a lot of women. So if you are an employer, you need to know the conditions, the living conditions of every single person that you employ, especially if they're female, because it's really, really important, because you could literally be the person that's their life. They need to be able to walk into the office and say to you, I can't go back today. I need to make a plan because this is what happened last night. And you need to be able to help them as someone who has them in your organization and they're adding value. And so, with intersectionality, it's women who need the jobs, because without those jobs, they literally have to rely on their abusers. And it's really, really important to support them in small ways. Making sure, if you're at McDonald's, that everyone who knocks off at a certain time has someone who drops them off at the taxi station. I don't think that's too much to ask someone who is making thousands, hundreds of thousands of rands off of someone else's feedback. I think these are things that labor needs to be looking at. We have a lot of unions who are supposed to be protecting employees. And what are they doing? These are things that they should be looking at. They should be looking at, okay, you have an organization that employs 10,000 people. What are the benefits of being employed there? Are you safe? Not just at the organization, but when you're working ridiculous hours, where you know that people need to use public transport, and public transport itself is not safe for a whole host of reasons. Are they getting there safely? Are they getting their kindness? Are they able to also get home at a decent hour? You actually need to know. And I think that's really important. So, you know, with the essential workers training, it's actually also trying to get the buy-in of the employer. Yeah, that's just my addition.
And the way you spoke about it really made me think for a second, because we know that during COVID, now when employers were allowed to open up, they had to implement all sorts of policies to ensure social distancing, sanitization. It should be the same kind of approach to GBV and COVID.
Exactly.
So I think that's quite an important thing you've hit on there. It's not just about employer buy-in, government has a responsibility too. Katlego would like to add some thoughts. So I'm gonna hand over to her to add her thoughts in.
Hi everyone. Is everybody able to hear?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah,
okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share on this platform. Kibela, thank you so much also for you organizing this roundtable.
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and let me start with that. But we have to start somewhere, right? But there comes a time where talking just remains in some way or the other a little bit obsolete, because we need to start taking more transformative action, you know. Same with racial injustice, especially in corporate society, you know. And that may be a spanner in the works, and somehow they socially do tie in. But before I lead us into a rapid hole with the topic, it really is up to us as, you know, agents of the court and lawmakers and testers of the law to remedy this crisis. This is a global crisis. Okay, and I think one of the ladies also shared that it's not only here in South Africa nationally that we are dealing with similar situations such as what we're dealing with now, but it's a global pandemic. We're dealing with two global pandemics. You're right in saying that, and all you're saying is nothing but the truth. Our Constitution is said to be one of the best in the world, but how when we have the highest rate and violent murder stats in the world? You ask yourself why some other countries don't have such high crime rates. They don't play there. They don't necessarily exonerate like how we do here. They really quick to either frustrate or execute. Or, yeah, I'm not trying. That's a whole different conversation altogether. I mean, how does someone do something so disparaging to even small children? You ask yourself. We need our people to get into gear. We need to put on our running shoes and really fight this crisis. Crimes have to be punished accordingly, in my opinion. And without oversimplifying it, with this preservation of our constitution that was built on tears of Black families, it's a big problem because we don't necessarily have we're not tackling the situation in a bit of a practical sense, if I may put it that way. And yeah, basically that's just my 2 cents in the whole topic. And you know, pressure on our judges, our lawmakers, and everybody else in between. I mean, I'm a professional myself. I work in property law. I worked a little bit in medical law, and I came across a lot of clients who came for one particular remedy to their issues, such as medical negligence, for instance. But when I sat with these clients, I was afforded an opportunity to really touch into what is exactly that's happening in their lives. And the problem is deeper than I went to Baragona Hospital, and as a result, I've got this injury, or I tried to get to a hospital and something else happened. They are dealing with serious issues. They are dealing with really, like, and more often than not, as a legal professional, you have to put on so many hats. You're a psychologist in some sense, you are a counselor in some sense, you are trying to remedy so many situations that sometimes you don't even know where to start. You have to put on so many hats. And it all starts, yes, with conversation. It's more active work that we need to do, and we need to push our brothers, push our fathers, our uncles. Even that mentality, Obuti, you can't talk like that to a child. You can't talk like that to a female child to say, "Kula." What's the term? Kula stata sodlama benches. You know, it's not a very it's not good to say things like that. We need to educate the people around us. I mean, some people are even dealing with some of these situations in areas and places in which that they're limited to how much they can talk about or share. Some people are experiencing these type of issues in corporate society, where even your boss is the person that is making you feel that way. So how do we, as legal professionals, and as members who are active in corporate society, period, how do we tackle these issues? Okay, that's my question. I think to everybody, but we need to just pretty much start there. Really, I think so. Our policymakers, our constitution, really, we have a lot of homework. I think we need to really work on it with a red pen to see where are we defecting, where are the
Yeah.
cracks. That's all.
No, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts, Katlego. And I think, the one takeaway for me is, this is not a simple issue. And when we are dealing with it as women who are lawyers, we are wearing many hats. I know we could all talk, possibly for the next hour, next 2 weeks, next 2 years about all of these issues. But I am just mindful of the time, and I promised Bello that I would keep us to time, and it is 7:01. So, with your leave, I'd like to just, sort of conclude and pass it back to Tibelo and, sort of say, I think this is just the start of a conversation. This is not even we haven't even reached the end of the beginning. I think, it's important for us to continue these discussions, continue supporting each other and sharing with each other. And I'm so grateful to sister-in-law and to Bello for putting this together and creating this platform for us to all come together as women of color and really share our experiences and share some of our pain and some of our ideas for the solutions. So Tibelo, I don't know if you'd like to just conclude and yeah.
I just have a message that was sent to me privately in closing. It is anonymous, but a lady's just informing me that my last year of serving articles was a traumatic experience. I worked under a manager who made advances on a regular, to which I continuously declined. However, it fell on deaf ears. The situation escalated to a point whereby I was victimized at every opportunity he would get. This resulted in my reluctance to go to work and greatly affected my productivity. He moved on to make advances to other candidate attorney who eventually turned into a romantic relationship with him. That relationship deteriorated to a point where he physically assaulted her during a work function in front of other legal professionals. What gave me more anxiety was witnessing a room full of legal professionals witnessing such and no one standing up and calling out the wrong. It left me fearing entering another workspace.
That is powerful. Yeah.
Wow.
Manchadi, I saw you had your hands up. So, I mean, maybe I'll pass the last thought to you, Manchadi.
No, I mean, my last thought really is that there's a genocide in South Africa and it's against Black women. That's really all I have to say after hearing what Debelo had to say. That's what it is. It's not a pandemic, it is a genocide. We are being lynched by our own Black men, and the justice system is failing us.
Zimasa, any last thoughts that you'd like to offer before we close?
Yeah, I don't even know if I have any last thoughts. Because we can never have last thoughts when it comes to this.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to bed thinking about this. We're gonna wake up. This will be our reality. It will be our reality the next day and the next day and the next day. But I think, look, piece by piece, raising your hand, whatever principles possibly that we can put in place, look out for another woman at all times. Look out for another woman, look out for another child all the time. It doesn't matter. The moment I see a child just running without their mother in a store, I'm just like, where's your mother? Like, it's like, oh, there's, okay, fine. Look out for every woman, look out for every child. This is not a joke. Do your bit, do what you can at work.
Yeah.
Call the behavior out, change a policy, speak to your manager, escalate your manager, and those are really just my last thoughts, honestly. And I guess we will continue to work day in, day out for a better country and for a better world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would like to leave us on a slightly more optimistic and hopeful note, because I don't think we want to spend the rest of the evening in depression. So all I'll say is the sister-in-law platform, I've recently discovered it. It is a sisterhood. We are all sisters, and I think, we are all given this space to support each other. And so we should, this is our forum and our space that, a woman of color has generously created for all of us. And I think, like you said, there's no last thoughts on this issue. But, I would like to thank each of you, Tibelo, Manchadi, and Zimasa, for sharing your experiences, sharing your pain, sharing your anger and passion, and also your solutions and thoughts. And I think, we all we need to do now is keep doing what we're doing and keep improving on it. So, thank you so much to everybody who joined us.
Thank you, Sephora.
Thank you to everyone, and Katlego for sharing your thoughts, and everybody else. And I'm sure we'll continue the discussion, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, or in real life, hopefully, once the lockdown ends.
And I think I'll do a write-up for Katlego. I wanted to answer the corporate question. I think I'll share my thoughts with Tibelo, and maybe we can, answer some of her questions.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for all the ladies.
Thank you.
Who took the time out to join us. Definitely hoping for more engagement on every platform we can do. We can reach out to each other, and just, if we change the mind of one man, guys, one man, there's 12 participants on this conversation. It only takes us to change one man, and it can be our brother, it can be our uncle, it can be our father, calling out that drunk uncle at family functions who, other people just giggle because, oh, he always does this, but if you can be that one brave niece who calls him out, that we just need to change one man at a time. And I think it's possible. We just need to change the conditioning of one little boy at a time, doing away with gender stereotypes, with boys must be tough and girls must be, soft and loving and nurturing. No, humans must be tough. Humans must be loving and nurturing, So it really does take each one of us here being very conscious and very deliberate with the way we interact with the men closest to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. It was wonderful to meet you all. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Sephora. Thank you, Tibelo. Thank you for the platform. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.